Alright, so we've come to the point with the K98 that we want to strip this shellac red finish off that the Soviets put on here, um, because it looks bad. It's certainly not what the Germans would have used on the gun. We've got a few products. We've got acetone, which be careful when you use, because if you're in a confined area with not a lot of ventilation, you will get a headache or worse. So make sure you have good ventilation. We've also got a product from Clean Strip that we've used a couple times. It's just premium stripper. It's a foaming stripper that foams on the surface of the gun, the surface of the stock, and it tends to stay there a little longer and stay wet longer. We also have something by Zip Strip, which is simple paint and finish remover, which is a liquid that you spread on. We're going to use all three of these products. First, we're going to start with the acetone. Basically, I've got some paper towel here. Just gonna pour a fair amount on here, and this is it'll strip a little bit of the finish off, but it's mostly to clean it and get it prepared. You can see it rubbing off there. It's mostly to prepare it for the actual finish stripper. Gets a little bit of it off, but acetone dries really quickly. It's not something that sticks around for very long. And the idea is that the finish will get sort of smoothed out. It's just less work for the actual stripper to do. And that'll make the job go quicker and a little cleaner, because if you don't do it really well the first time, you will end up using multiple coats of stripper or finish remover, which you may have to do anyway to get a good clean off. Because if you're wanting to redo the stock like we are, which is something a little bit lighter in color, you're going to need to remove, all of the shellac, and then also start pulling the old oil that's probably pretty deep down in the wood out of it. Alright. You can already feel at this point it really smoothed out the shellac finish. Alright. And any paint that was on here, like they used a lot, it'll come off with this stripper. Yeah, so basically you can see it pulled off a little bit. It cleaned it up to some extent. At this point, we're probably ready to move over to the liquid stripper, which we're going to use on top of both of these items. And I'm going to take over the camera now. We're going to switch, and he's going to start with the liquid. Now you want to use something like a brush, but be careful if you're using a paintbrush, because a paintbrush will get destroyed by anything plastic will basically be destroyed by the stripping material. So we've just been using little pieces of cardboard, whatever we can use to spread it on. Sometimes you have to use more. Another thing to watch out for as you add the stripper and allow it to sit on the stock is that it's going to dry, and if it does dry, you'll have to reapply it to those areas, because once it dries, it doesn't seem to work as well. It's also a really messy job, so make sure you have good backing to set it on. Right now we're just using cardboard, which seems to be enough to stop the stripper from causing harm to what's underneath it. You'll want to also make sure you apply it to both sides. You can do one side at a time if you really wanted to. We've had good luck doing it on both sides, just trying to do the whole stock in one shot. You want to do the handguard and get all the pieces. But this is essentially the process that you'll use. And you could use this on other stocks too. Even if they didn't have a shellac finish, you could use it on an oil finish, and it would help remove it. Of course, eventually you won't be able to get much more oil out of the stock. It'll eventually, you'll just have to settle for what it is, unless you want to bleach it. As you can see, rubber gloves also a good thing to have around if they're strong enough to withstand the paint remover. But anyways, we'll leave you here. That's the basic application of the paint remover, and the next video will show basically the stock after we've stripped it off. Basically, it's the process for getting the paint remover off after you've let it sit. It needs to sit on the wood for anywhere between 20 minutes and a half hour. Sometimes multiple coats are needed, but You know, after it sits for that time, you can strip it off using really anything. A rag works well, light steel wool works really well. Just something to push it off, because it sloughs off the shellac finish. But anyways, in our next video, we're going to show you the stock after we've done that process. Alright, so we've got the K98K stock stripped. We've done one coat already, and it got off quite a bit of oil and shellac that was just sort of caked on there. But we've used citrus strip this time for the second stripping coat. It's actually a gel, and it's really a lot safer. It's not as toxic as the other stuff. We've let this sit on here for a half an hour. We're going to go ahead and remove it now. We've also got some Scotch-Brite padding, which is kind of coarse, but not too coarse. You can also use steel wool to remove it, but we're going to need to try the Scotch-Brite. And I'm going to use some gloves too, just to keep it off my hands. But we'll start with the hand guard. Now, it pulls off some of the finish, but the handguard actually was already in pretty good shape compared to the rest of the rifle. After you get the citrus strip or whatever else you're using off the stock, you can actually you could use acetone or mineral spirits or something just to give it a quick bath and sort of get off what's left of the stripping compound. It looks like we've got a lot of staining in the stock, because we're not pulling off. I think we've pulled off all the shellac at this point. I think what's left is just darkness in the wood, which is oil that's built up inside there. Of course, underneath the shellac there was probably oil. I'm sure they didn't remove it, so it's probably pretty deep inside the wood. But we're going to try our best to get off this stripping compound and make the stock look a little nicer. Now the other thing we're going to do to the stock probably is use another type of cleaner that probably has some bleach in it to lighten up the stock and help get out these stains. Basically, it went from a stock that was dark, really dark shellac red, to a stock that's not nearly as dark. The shellac's gone. It's got some staining, but actually when we clean this off and it dries up, it'll probably be quite a bit lighter. Okay, now that we've gotten the stock cleaned off, we've got the stripping compound cleaned off of the stock, we're going to use some mineral spirits to just kind of wipe down the stock and clean what's left of the stripping compound. As you can see through that last bit, the stock lightened up a little bit. We used the Scotch-Brite pad to kind of work on it and clean it up. It was really dark when it first started, as you can remember from the first video. It was almost black, but this is going to clean it up, and we're going to see how this works. With the mineral spirits, you'll want to use it pretty thick because you're just kind of trying to rinse it, so you'll want a rag that's pretty well saturated. You should probably be using gloves when you do this. We're not using gloves because we're pretty hardcore. We like all sorts of dangerous chemicals on our skin. Got most of the shellac on, and now we're just down to the wood, and we're probably going to have to use some sort of bleach to get it lighter, which is our goal, to lighten it up and then sort of darken it back to our liking instead of having it really, really dark. Anyway, stay tuned, and we'll do the next video hopefully of us bleaching it. Alright, so we've got the stock cleaned up. We're going to go ahead and use some Behr Premium 2-in-1 wood prep. It's supposed to help remove stains, and we've tested it on a small piece. It looks like it's going to do a good job for us, so we're just going to apply it to the stock and then spread it around with a nylon brush. It'll foam up kind of like soap, and then we'll let it sit and let it work its magic and remove some stains.
Okay, so here we got this, and this is what it looks like after we hit it with that wood prep and cleaner. So obviously it's been lightened quite a bit. We rinsed it off, and gonna take it to steam it and try to get some of these dents and things out and swell the wood back up while it's still damp. Okay, so now we're gonna steam the stock like we promised.
Basically, you're going to want to get a damp rag, an iron, place a damp rag between the stock and the iron. The stock will want to be wet at this point as well. And just press the iron into the wood back and forth. You don't want to wait too long in any single spot, but just enough time that the wood's going to get steamed and it'll absorb some of this moisture and swell up a bit. Alright, so we've used the iron and the damp rag and we've steamed the stock. As you can see, the stock is definitely a lot lighter than it was. We've got off most of the finish. So we're just going to let it dry out and then use a little bit of steel wool to buff it down and smooth it out, and then we're going to reapply boiled linseed oil and get this thing looking good.